Hi, welcome back to English, Chapter 2. I'm going to look at the language itself. Perhaps it's a little dry, and there will be some, if you like, wetter stuff later that might bring tears of laughter, tears of tragedy to your eye with literature. But Paper 1 is all about language and your competence at language, the 5 areas of language. Because we study English as our first language, we often really don't study it, in the sense that most CERT higher level students have spoken and heard it from birth. We've learned how to use it without thinking too much about it for much of our lives. You started out, I don't know if you remember it, with the word mama. You're probably a famous thing in your household, or you're a legend because of how you used the word baba or cat very cutely when you were very young, and you got on with it ever since. So, as time went on, you figured out normal word order for a sentence: subject, verb, object, and that helped you develop as well. I shot the sheriff, when you were playing as a kid or listening to your dad or mom listen to Bob Marley. I didn't shoot no deputy. No, no. So, 2 straightforward sentences following that sequence. You feel probably you know English by instinct and have felt for a long time. So, without thinking about the rules, you kind of know them. And then you also know when the rules are broken, which is very useful for emphasis. So, as it says on that previous slide, I'll go back to it just to set you up there. Especially in speaking, but sometimes in written too, change the typical word order and use untypical word order as a way of focusing on or emphasizing something. So let's look at this dialogue here. Somebody called Jill is chatting to Caitlin. Hey, have you decided what color to paint the bedrooms yet? Caitlin, the bedrooms we've already painted. We decided on white for now. We still can't decide on the color for the bathrooms. So here the object bedrooms is put up at the front of the sentence for emphasis, and to kind of make a point that Caitlin wants to Jill. So you can see some tension between them just because of the placing of the object bedrooms at the start of that sentence. Have a look at that for a moment if you want by pausing to sort of appreciate this point and then resume. We often have a choice of word to use. Our vocabulary is wide. The same for almost the same activity. You walk, how boring. Stroll, saunter, ramble, how lovely that is, eh? Trudge, coming to school, hike, march, etc. All describe our progress, if you like, on foot from A to B. This menu of words that we have for most common things is known as synonyms. And do we have a lot of them in English? But does the choice of synonyms matter? Gotta try and say that, eh? Synonyms. Does the choice matter? Look at this list here. Big group of similar meaning to words, if you want to mess up the English language there. Absurd. Bizarre. Something bizarre about the way I put that there, wasn't there? Comical. And as I said, this is a dry topic, isn't it? It isn't so comical, is it? Fantastic. Farcical. Funny. Hilarious. Humorous. Much of that is for later, I know. But anyway, look at all of those. Can they be interchanged? Hardly. Look at this example. You're talking to a teacher. One of these might get a phone call home, eh? Hey, miss, you're funny. And miss, you're farcical. You tell me which of those could have your maths phone buzzing some evening after school, eh? So anyhow, we use vocabulary and we structure it into phrases and sentences. Well, would have known that. Known as syntax, without bothering with the theory. If in your life you have come to English as a second language, some of you have, you may have one advantage, that you probably became more technically aware of grammar and structure of expression as a result. That can be a good thing in class. So, a primary aim of the Leaving Cert syllabus is for students to become more critically aware. It's a big, important term, concept. Critically aware of the how and why of language use in different situations. We aim to be more, get that again, can't even speak, can I? We aim to be more aware of the context of language use and to reflect upon it, especially when we write. Reflecting upon language is at the heart of paper one success. So, in paper one, the whole aim is to comprehend texts and fulfill Leaving Cert tasks. And to do all that, we need to understand purpose and how purpose affects choice of language. Altogether, Leaving Cert students encounter, learn, and identify 5 language types. Do you recall the old riddle from childhood about why the chicken crossed the road? Well, now, for a moment, I want you to consider carefully the following 5 similar reports on the situation. A feathered biped moves across a road. An eager chicken suddenly crosses a busy road. If the chicken is eager and the road busy, there is some risk. A heroic yardbird dashes urgently through traffic. A soft, fluttering fowl dances blithely through fortuitous gaps. So, next slide, read the statements lined up together and decide if they all mean the same thing. Decide if it's just a mere random choice of vocabulary. A feathered biped moves across a road. An eager chicken suddenly crosses a busy road, etc. Just read the other three for yourself and think about what I asked you there. If you've paused, and now you can resume. Do some of these statements convey a tone or attitude towards the subject? It's an interesting aspect too about language, isn't it? You actually see how meaning changes because language is used differently in each statement. Now, this will be very important for getting you into the notion of the 5 language types. So we'll give them all numbers. You're getting used to them now. You're thinking more about them. You're aware of the difference. Remember that word nuance. Nuance of meaning. It changes as the color changes. So the first exercise, and all big there, haven't I? There we are. Would you be able to ascribe or give a separate purpose to each statement? Numbers 1 to 5. How about now you pause the slideshow and write 1 to 5 on a notepad or fill in the blanks in the notes that go with this course. Give it a go. So 1 to 5. And in your words, by your light, write very briefly a purpose for each of those 5 different statements about the chicken crossing the road. So go back to the last slide, leave it open and try it. So you're pausing for that and then you'll resume. So if you've resumed by now, we're on to a second exercise straight away. I want you to match the numbered statements 1 to 5 on that slide above with the lettered statements A to E on the next slide. No. So A, one of those, but the order is different here. influences how you feel about the situation. Another of those coloured statements just provides the necessary information. A third one dazzles with words to amaze or delight you. Another one retells it as an anecdote or succinct story. And yet another one argues about the situation in a logical way. Now, I'd really like you just to pause this slide and reread it, and then fill in the blanks in your notes or on a separate piece of paper on a notepad as per the instruction there. So pause. So you're trying it out on something like that now, having resumed, and I wonder, does your answer match these? And again, you can simply pause and look at the slide and compare the combinations here, suggested by me, with the ones you came up with. All of this exercise amounts to steps in learning. Being correct doesn't matter at all. It's by doing this that you will realize so much more about the different language types. So pause. So now you've probably resumed. The following list of language types is color coded in sequence to match the 5 statements about the chicken that you have been considering above. There they are, the 5 language types: information, narration, argument, language of persuasion, language of aesthetics, and numbered. The sentence is numbered again, and the order is the same as the 5 language types that I've just highlighted there above. You can keep going to and fro between the slides, pausing the show to sort of try and get this into your head anyhow. That's the beauty of this type of lesson. The definitions in the next slides, 5 slides, are color coded to match the 5 language types you have now learned to name. So the language of information, first one. So it informs, it lists facts, it's like an inventory of details. It presents content, it outlines various things. The language of narration, it entertains by telling a story. It engages us through suspense, through wonder, through atmosphere. It offers an experience and perhaps a reflection. Yeah. The language of argument convinces us, sets out to convince us. It leads to conclusions. It teases out. It sets out a sequence of thought. It reflects step by step. It appeals to reason and logic. It connects and may link cause to result. Whereas the language of persuasion is trying to persuade us to skip by it. But here it is. It's a type of use of English that sets out to convince us, but in a different way than the language of argument. It uses influence, so it influences us. It alters views. This type of language, the language of persuasion, prompts agreement or disagreement, prompts it. It uses association rather than logic. It relies a lot on emotion, on what we could call emotive effect. And the aesthetics is the one that wants to now skip. Or the final language of aesthetics, the one that students are often a little bit overawed by. That's just language that delights us by the cleverness or wit of the usage of it. It appeals to our imagination. It uses expression playfully and artfully. Now, the remarks about tone in the next slides are color coded to match the 5 language types as defined above for you. So, in the language of information, the tone is objective, unemotional. In the language of argument, well, it kind of tends to fly to these a lot. Let's skip the language of narration, where the tone can vary a huge amount, from reflective to objective at times, or intimate, depending on whether the narrator is close to us, almost giving the impression of being with us, or being at a great distance from us. The tone can be like amused, it can be satirical, it can be earnest, and many, many other words might be used depending on the way the story is told. In the language of argument, the tone is serious, usually kind of objective, it would be called. It may be urgent, it may be rational, but this appeal to reason means that it must be not too emotional in a way. It must be more objective. Whereas the language of persuasion is permitted to be very emotional. So the tone is persuasive. You feel you're being persuaded. It may be sarcastic, it may be mocking, it may be pained, it may be regretful, it may be wishful, it may induce guilt in you, etc. It may utilize fear. Finally, the language of aesthetics, the tone may be luxurious, indulgent, poignant, playful, seductive, highly sensual. Which of the 5 language types best explains the following little meme? Just think about it for a moment. Pause if you want. Is it informative? Is it argumentative? Is it narrative? Is it aesthetic? Or is it persuasive? You decide. Make a case. Get myself out of the way there, in my own way. So, it is. Is it factual? Telling a story? Is it making an argument? Is it twisting your feelings? Or playing with language in an intense or sensual manner? Go back to the slide, pause, and decide which of those 5 best suited. Did you say persuasive? Great. The way language appeals to you may be a clue to style and the language type. Consider the following suggestions. So, the language of information sort of appeals to your curiosity. The language of narration appeals to your sense of morality, right or wrong, justice of what's happening to a character. That's speaking very broadly. The language of argument appeals to reason. The language of persuasion appeals to emotion. The language of aesthetics appeals to imagination. Quick exercise. Match the language type and user from the 2 lists below. So let's see what that could be. So there are the 5 language types, same sequence, same color code as before. So match those 1 to 5 to F to J. So just pause and consider this. You probably will get the same answer as most other people. I think hopefully it's reasonably obvious now. And if you get 1 or 2 of them at variance with others or with me, that's fine too, because this is part of the learning steps. Isn't that right? That's all we're at now. So use the numbers 1 to 5 and the letters F to J to record your decision. Before you advance to the slide, that puts them together. And there it is. Did the dice fall this way for you? Pause and have a look. So there is a kind of another way of presenting the answers, and the slide will sort of give you a bit of an insight into connection between the language label and its likely use. And I'm trying to put myself in different places here as you read it. Hopping around out of your way. Right. Now, moving on. Pause if you want. We move on now anyway. So, in this lecture, as our purpose is to learn, we have looked at the 5 language types in isolation from each other. So, it's a bit like, as in the picture there, laboratory conditions. It's a bit artificial. Because often in real life, 2 or more types are present in the same text. But usually one is dominant, and that will certainly be the case on paper 1 in the Leaving Cert. So I hope you now have an overview of the 5 language types, how they appeal differently to us, the typical range of tones in each style, the context for using each type. The next lectures will provide a closer scrutiny of each language type, beginning with the language of information. Thank you so much for your attention and for tuning in here to the Great Academy for this lesson. See you next time. And some happy learning ahead as you go back over that slide.